Good morning. Good to have you back. Good to see you. We have plenty of snacks in there, guys, so please bring some back with you. Eat today. Welcome back. It's good to see you. Our first I'm Lizzie Shake-Snyder. If I didn't get to meet you yesterday, Professional Development Manager with the Auditor's Office. Our first session today is Internal Investigations, a comprehensive guide for local governments, safeguarding integrity, compliance, and trust. Brian Blackwell is a seasoned attorney and workplace investigator with over 38 years of experience in employment law, civil rights, and compliance investigations. As Chief Investigator for Workplace Investigations of the South, he specializes in conducting impartial, legally sound investigations into harassment, discrimination, retaliation, safety violations, and systemic compliance issues. His dual expertise as a litigator and investigator positions him as a trusted resource for organizations seeking integrity and accountability. Please welcome Mr. Brian Blackwell.
Good morning. Hope y'all all are enjoying the new winter that we're experiencing today. I wanted to start out just by saying that, and I know it kind of went unsaid yesterday, but I feel like I need to say it. So the most important thing to remember about all of the auditing or investigative things that you're going to hear about is that, pardon?
I think you're right. Is it the green light on?
You don't hear me now?
No. Did it now? Test.
Test. All right, great. I think the most important thing that needs to be said is that the main goal in auditing or in investigations is to find the truth, right? That's what auditors are trying to do, find the truth about your financial records. Think about it, must be going out.
This would be a great day.
Let me give you this, and I'm going to go see if I can change the batteries.
Just keep turning itself off.
Test. You're going to have to hold it like an ice cream cone.
I'm going to eat this like an ice cream cone. No matter whether you're auditing or investigating, the goal of both of those things is to find the truth, whether it's the truth as far as your financial condition or the truth as far as what we're going to talk about today. So I wanted to start out by giving you guys some statistics. And after being here all day yesterday, I went back and tried to verify these things, but these are kind of important intros to what I'm going to talk about. So in 2023, a survey found that 93% of American employees report having experienced some form of workplace discrimination. 93%. In 2024, that fiscal year, the EEOC received over 88,000 charges of discrimination. But also a study in 2022 found that 68% of employees who experienced workplace harassment didn't file a formal complaint. And the reason is that people are afraid to complain for fear of losing their jobs. 56% of all charges filed with the EEOC in 2024 were for retaliation. That kind of blends in with the first one. People are afraid. A Pew Research study, and I'm sure y'all are all familiar with Pew, concluded that 40% of black workers report being discriminated due to their race. And these lead to things like this. In 2024, a federal jury in Indiana awarded $1 million to a black plaintiff who alleged that he wasn't hired because of his race. In September of that year, an Alabama jury awarded over $3.8 million to an Iranian research scientist who was harassed on the basis of his race. Later in September, a jury in Washington awarded almost $238 million to a black UPS driver who alleged that UPS discriminated against him because of his race. And these aren't just private sector issues. And this will tell you something. I'm sure if y'all are familiar with human resources at all, you've heard of an organization called SHRM. Last December, SHRM, which is the world's largest HR group, was hit with an $11.5 million verdict in a racial discrimination case. Later that month, in what I think is the highest discrimination verdict in U.S. history, Liberty Mutual, the insurance company, was hit for a $103 million verdict in an age discrimination case. So let's talk about what we're here to talk about. So internal investigations are kind of the backbone of effective governance. They help organizations confirm or refute allegations, remediate harm, meet legal obligations, and demonstrate accountability to employees, regulators, and the public. Most of the time that we get involved in issues are based upon complaints. And so an employee makes a complaint. My supervisor has discriminated against me, I think, because of my race, sex, age, or those kind of things. And we're hired to go in and conduct an investigation and determine whether or not those allegations are true or not. It's not our job to confirm that they're not true in support of the governing authority. It's to confirm what happened. And so, we're always guided by, as I said initially, finding out what is the truth. If they're handled well, investigations can protect trust, reduce risk, and when mishandled, they can deepen crises, fuel litigation, and damage reputations of your governing authority. So a discipline framework, clear triggers, defensible methods, ethical safeguards, and timely follow-through is critical to ensuring that investigations are fair, comprehensive, and credible. Oftentimes, and we've kind of worked also parallel to the legislative auditor's office. And so sometimes an employee will call the legislative auditor and make a complaint about some issue, and the local governing authority will hire us, and we will conduct a parallel investigation to what the auditor's doing. And that's done in an effort to show the auditor's office that the governing authority is responding promptly and trying to take remedial action to fix the problem. So when the auditor finishes their investigation, the governing authority can go to them and say, we've already looked at this, here's what we've done, and there's nothing else to see here, basically. So let's talk about some definitions and scope. Internal investigations are formal inquiries conducted by an organization to determine whether laws, regulations, or policies have been violated. They can arise in a number of different contexts: workplace conduct, harassment, discrimination, financial and accounting issues like fraud or misstatements, misrepresentations, regulatory compliance like privacy issues, ethics issues, safety, data breaches, and there's a variety of other issues that arise in this context as well. But the fundamental goal is to establish facts, evaluate them against standards, and decide on appropriate remedial actions. As far as smaller governing authorities, this is one of the things that was talked about by, I think, pretty much every speaker yesterday. Policies. Evaluate them against standards. Policies are standards that guide employees. And so HR policies and practices, I think somebody talked in the context of the famous stuff about having correct overtime policies and those kind of things. Those are some of the things that the conduct is compared to. So let's talk about just some core definitions. An internal investigation is a structured, evidence-based inquiry into suspected wrongdoing to confirm or refute allegations, and ultimately to decide if those allegations are proved to be true, how to correct them, and if they're decided to be false, what can we do to make sure employees know that what the standards are and what they're guided against. We want to establish truth, mitigate risk, prepare for potential regulatory scrutiny like the Legislative Auditor's Office, and reinforce culture and compliance controls. There's a programmatic role as well. So investigations are a critical component of an overall program to ensure compliance. Ad hoc, reactive approaches tend to produce incomplete facts and erode credibility. And that's important because investigations shouldn't be just a knee-jerk reaction to something. They should be embedded in the policies and practices of the local governmental authority. And the reason for that is that shows public officials, and it also shows taxpayers, that you've got a program to deal with issues when they arise. You're just not saying, oh, somebody said this, let's do an investigation. You've already got that in place. Some investigations can obviously be handled internally. Someone complains, I didn't get paid overtime this week. I worked 3 extra hours. I'm owed $45. You don't need to hire an external investigator to investigate that complaint, right? I mean, it's $45. It would cost you more than that to hire someone. You investigate it, determine whether it's correct, and if it's correct, you pay the person. But there are situations where external investigators are not only necessary, but kind of required, because you certainly don't want to investigate something, get sued, and go to court and have a court determine that the investigation was merely a sham to protect the agency that you work for. That's the last thing that you want to do. And there's actually a case that was decided by a federal judge here in Baton Rouge against the Department of Corrections recently, where the judge said exactly that. The investigation was a sham. And it can't be used to support the agency's position in this case. These are especially true where credibility, privilege, and conflicts of interest are at stake. And so it's kind of hard for the Human Resources Department in a local governmental body to investigate the president of the police jury what's going to happen to that person if the investigation turns out bad? Probably not something that's very good. Or it's probably not good for a human resources department of a school board to investigate a superintendent who has the authority to hire and fire. So, those programmatic type issues and governance issues are extremely important in this context. And those are situations where you probably need to hire somebody externally. So what are the triggers for determining whether to conduct an investigation at all? So they can be formal and informal. A lot of local governments now have hotlines. I know a lot of local governments have a button on their website, report fraud, abuse. It brings you right to the legislative auditor's website. HR complaints, audit anomalies, regulator inquiries, social media allegations. Somebody goes on social media and posts a post that says, my supervisor has been harassing me at work. Anybody out there in the world have any suggestions for me? Demand letters or internal control signals. It's important to early document and preserve information, evidence, protect people, and to prevent escalation of those risks. These are the common triggers: formal complaints, casual comments, suspected misconduct incidents, online allegations, regulator communications, demand letters, usually from attorneys. So the second thing you got to do is you got to determine how urgent, so you get a demand letter. How urgent is it that you need to start something? My suggestion to you would be is that if you get, if there's a comment at the coffee station, it may be easier to handle than if you get a demand letter from a lawyer. If you get a demand letter from a lawyer, you probably need to shut everything down and make sure that you start your investigation immediately. If you get an inquiry about an issue from the legislative auditor's office, that's also a trigger, and it may require you to start your investigation immediately. It's important also to determine whether or not, the issue is a one-time deal or if it's more systemic. And when we were talking about yesterday, a governmental body that has, 112 citizens, I'm sure the organization didn't have that many employees. It's a little bit easier to grapple with, where you're a school system that has 40,000 employees, a little bit more difficult. Yes, sir.
Is there a source to go to find external investigators, or somewhere like some website you can list or that shows credentials or anything like that for people to find external investigators for these?
Well, the difficulty in Louisiana is this type of function is relatively new. I think we were the first company that solely does external investigations. But I'd welcome you to contact me if you want some references for some folks. There are very few in Louisiana, unfortunately, as of this date. But there are 5 or 6 people around who do these kind of investigations. So what are the escalation triggers and how to triage them? Senior leadership involvement, the situations we were talking about earlier. One of the investigations that I did recently, and I can talk about it because it's in the context of a public body, and so therefore it's public, was a superintendent alleged to have been involved in the forging of some documents and the receipt of some monies to which he wasn't due. That was, again, an investigation that we did parallel to an investigation of the Legislative Auditor's Office that ended up with that particular superintendent resigning and being charged criminally by the Attorney General's office. Protected classes are whistleblowers, potential criminal conduct, and those typically are all should be escalated to someone externally. So what's the governance role? And when I'm talking about governance, I'm talking about whatever the governing authority may be, whether it's a police jury, whether it's a school board, whether it's a town council. That governance body is going to shape the context of the investigation. And my suggestion to you would be that they should hire the investigator and tell them, this is what we want you to investigate. And as any auditor, financial auditor will tell you, just like in the context of a financial audit, sometimes you get what we would call creep, right? And so, people tend to start investigating and they uncover things not in the context of the investigation. But they actually may be worse than what you were hired to do. And so if somebody comes in and does a financial audit and they say, we're doing the audit because we're following up on some things from last year, and but when we're here, we noticed that there was $10,000 missing from the bank account. Well, that's going to lead them somewhere else. And that's kind of what happened in the investigation I was talking about with this superintendent, is that we were hired to investigate one thing, and when we did, we found out that he had received 6 figures more in salary than he should have. And had directed an employee to pay that additional salary to him. But these early decisions by the governing authority set the tone and guardrails for the investigation. These are very important. You got to have somebody who's qualified and impartial to do investigations. You can't hire your buddy who's going to support you, because that investigation is going to be determined to be a sham. So in complex or sensitive cases like we're talking about, it's best to engage external or independent investigators, not only for objectivity, because they don't have a bone in the fight, but also to protect any attorney-client privilege. Scope and the mandate: define clear objectives, questions to answer, relevant timeframes, custodians, and applicable legal and policy standards. And then put some guardrails on it. What are the boundaries? These are the things that we want you to do. These are the things that we don't want you to do. And those are all part of, when we're engaged, we generally do it by a proposal and the acceptance of that proposal. And our proposal says, these are all of the things that we're going to do. These are the things that you're going to do. And, you need to allow us full access to all the resources that we need internally and externally to perform our job, like access to employees, access to documents. This is very important. So there are attorney-client issues, both with respect to the governing authority and with respect to employees. And so let's start at the second one. whenever investigators interview witnesses in this context, the witness needs to be told, I am not your lawyer, if they're a lawyer. I am not on your side. I'm here to do something independent of you. And so when I do investigations, I always tell witnesses, I don't represent anybody. All I'm here to do is ask you questions, but I'm not your lawyer. If you think you need a lawyer, we can stop the interview and you're welcome to go get one. We don't do this in the context that most people do. Most people do it in the context of they hire a lawyer. We consider ourselves in this function to be investigators first and lawyers second. So our role is not to do anything other than find the truth, report the truth, and make recommendations on how to correct the problem. Usually in the context of, for example, a police jury, where the DA is legal counsel for the jury, they still serve in that role. And so the report will be issued, given to that person, who then can counsel the governing authority on how best to handle that. But we do want to make sure what we do is confidential. And so we would obtain a list of potential witnesses. We generally start with not the complainant, but everybody else, and interview everyone else first, and would interview the complainant last, because reporting some kind of impropriety is always stressful to anyone. And if we can confirm the allegations without ever having to talk to the complainant, then that person we've alleviated a lot of stress in their lives. If we can't, then we will interview them at the end and try to make the best informed decision. But during that process, we also gather documents. We organize those documents. We scan those documents, and we maintain those documents. They're not shared with anybody. And we make sure that to the extent that we can, there's no retaliation taken against those who participate in the investigation. So part of planning for the investigation is to ensure that, just like with financial audits, we use checklists as well, because, again, it's hard to remember everything, right? I've been doing this for 38 years. I'm getting old. My mind probably isn't what it used to be. But if I have a checklist, I can certainly go down there and say, yes, we've done this, yes, we've done that, check it off, check it off. But in general, the elements would be to plan, preserve, collect, interview, analyze, report, remediate, and monitor. And each of those phases, just like in a financial audit, should be documented and performed with impartiality and care. The investigation plan. So what we want to have in the plan is we want to have timelines, who's doing what, roles, what are the legal considerations, is it a case where someone committed fraud, is it a case where someone alleges some type of discrimination. They all have different legal considerations and communication protocols, who, what, when, where, why, and how we're going to communicate with people. and also identify regulatory and employment law implications early. First thing is usually to issue what's called a litigation hold, and that is that if someone's making a complaint, you don't want their emails they may rely upon some email communication internally to support their complaint or some other internal document. You don't want those to go away, and so you hold those, and those are generally held in secured systems. We ask for them, and then we hold them so that we can ensure that they're there if needed in the future. The next step is to collect evidence and preserve it. We've talked about that. Here are some of the data sources that we have identified in the past. But it's very important, the last one is to maintain a chain of custody. When you receive something, who you received it from, and the identity of it, and that way, that's preserved for future use if necessary. The next step would be to draft, prepare for interviews, prepare neutral, open-ended questions. I'm asking you something. I'm not suggesting the answer to you. What is your name? Not as you're Miss Smith. Use consistent questioning. And the last one is important, and that's why I mentioned what I did just a while ago about the order, perhaps, of doing interviews. You got to ensure the psychological safety of witnesses and make sure that they understand that you're not going to be, we want you to be totally, completely honest. You're not going to be retaliated against for participating in this. And you should have policies in place that say those things. If you are interviewed during an investigation, you will not be retaliated against. That helps people feel like they can participate wholly and not hold back information. And you can't really get to the truth with part of the information, right? I mean, it's impossible. So if somebody tells you half of what happened, it's hard for me as an investigator to find out what happened. And if you get half in here and half from the next person, half from the next person, you have less than a whole picture. It's kind of like eating a slice of pie. The rest of it is still there. I like to eat the whole pie. So the analysis so you gather all this stuff as part of your investigation, and then somebody's got to sit down and actually think about or analyze what it is that you receive. So you evaluate the facts that you've uncovered against policies, codes of conduct, contractual obligations, and applicable laws. Consider intent, frequency, impact, and remedial history. We also assess initiatives, control, supervision, culture, training gaps, and whether the alleged misconduct is isolated or systemic. And then we try to apply an objective criteria consistently across all of those things. So after you gather, analyze, somebody wants a product of your work. In the case of a financial audit, that would be the audit report, right? That audit report would identify what the auditor did, compare it to, general accepted accounting principles, or in the case of governmental bodies, the ones applicable to governmental entities. and then tell you what exceptions there are or what things need to be addressed. The same thing really is part of this process. You know, we want to draft a clear factual report identifying what the background is, what the methodology was, what the findings were supported by evidence which we generally attach to the report itself or embed into the report. In the report that I did regarding the superintendent, what we did is we just took a screenshot and said, you know, this is the document where he told someone to pay him. The context was he told someone to, you know, y'all all know this, working for governmental bodies, you got an employee portion of retirement, you got an employer portion of retirement. He basically directed a payroll person to pay him back every pay period for the employee portion of his retirement contribution. And so the contribution was taken out of his check and then put back into his check. So we found the memo and we embedded it in the report, so whenever the school board received the report, it could see the memo in line with our analysis. We always tried to avoid speculation, and we try to distinguish our opinions clearly from what the facts are. You know, obviously you got to tailor the report to your audience, and we do maintain the files in secure access controlled repositories with audit trails. Generally, when something like this happens, and there are findings, you want to make suggestions to people on how can we stop this from happening again. And so that's what this is about, remediation. So what are the corrective actions? Discipline against the employee. In that particular case I was just talking about, the employee was given the opportunity, the superintendent was given the opportunity to be fired after a disciplinary hearing or to resign. He chose to resign. Policy revisions, control enhancements. In that situation, the superintendent should never have been able to direct a payroll employee to pay him his employee contributions back without it being reviewed by someone else, right? I mean, that's the kind of internal controls that not only in this context, but in the financial audit context that you want to have. You're not going to have one person directing a subordinate to do something with finances without having a second set of eyes look at it, whether that's the chief financial officer or someone else. Leadership accountability, self-reporting, et cetera. But none of those things really do much unless the responsibilities are assigned to you to do it, right? We can make recommendations all day. We recommend that you do these things, but we don't want to do that unless, you know, our client is going to actually follow through. And so we want to assign an owner and a timeline. So you own making sure the controls are in place, and you need to have that accomplished by X day. And if that requires approval of the governing authority, we need to do a resolution or do a policy revision or whatever it is, and present it to them by their next meeting or that kind of thing. But we also want to make sure that we talk about follow-up, because follow-up is important as well. So did what we recommend correct the problem? And are people following the new protocol? And so whoever the owner is, if it's this gentleman here in the front, you know, part of his role would be to say, okay, these are the proposed policies. 3 months later, I'm going to check Were there any other instances where something like this happened? Were the controls followed? Was a new process followed? And report that to the governing authority. What you did is now working. So here's some specialized scenarios. The biggest one that most people see are allegations of workplace conduct, harassment, and discrimination. The issues we want to address are, I think, obvious in some instances, not so obvious in others. Obviously, if someone is grabbing someone else by the rear end, that's an issue. Subtle comments like to an interviewee that, maybe my age, that we really want to have someone who is going to be here a long time. That's much more subtle form of age discrimination, right? Because you're in effect telling the person you're too old. We know you're not going to be here a long time. So there are a lot of issues like that are involved. In the end, if you do an investigation, either yourself or you hire someone, you want to make sure that they promote fairness and they mitigate damage to the organization's reputation along with mitigating risk. Financial misconduct, we talked about this briefly with the issue with this particular superintendent. There are all different kinds of financial misconduct. Obviously, we heard for an hour yesterday, some of the issues lead to the organization being taken over and run by an external person. But sometimes these things come up in the context of investigating someone else, and folks have say you have two accounting clerks, and one of them determines that the other one is doing something improper. They go on the legislative auditor's hotline and make a report. Generally, that would lead to an inquiry from the legislative auditor to someone in the organization. Says, we've got a report. We're coming to see you. And then you know what the allegations are. That would be a time when you might want to consider hiring someone external to investigate that problem. Data privacy and cybersecurity are extremely important these days. Need to have in place. The issue with the water systems yesterday was intriguing to me. I would imagine they probably, if they're handwriting the bills, they probably don't have a lot of data privacy considerations going on. They probably, if they're handwriting the bills, they're probably handwriting a log of who they sent the bills to. But in any event, particularly in business type operations of local governments, you need to make sure that, for example, credit card information or banking information where people pay bills online, that all those things are secure and not subject to being hacked. Because the last thing that you want to do in a small town would be for everybody's checkbook to be drained overnight. So those are important issues. Safety and compliance, these happen around the state pretty much on a daily basis where somebody's injured on a job. They either violated a safety rule or they had a near miss, fell off of a tractor, all of those kind of things. Those kind of implicate different process considerations. But again, the goal is to find out what happened, why, and to keep it from happening a second time. There are many, many, many pitfalls that investigators run into when connecting or conducting an investigation. It's the job of the investigator, whether they're internal or external, to anticipate those and to make sure that they don't cause you to get off track. Impartiality and bias are probably the two most important things that can derail a proper investigation. So pressure from stakeholders or your local governing body. You know, we really need you to back our superintendent here, and let him get back to work, and report out something that we can send to the auditor, that the legislative auditor's office is going to make this all go away, and you can't succumb to that. You just can't do it. Maintaining privilege is important. Maintaining confidentiality is important for obvious reasons, and information should only be disclosed to those with a need to know during the investigative process. And so I'll tell you that during this process involving the school superintendent, and I'm only mentioning this because this was recent and it will give you an idea. I had ongoing discussions with the school board president, not about what the findings were, because I didn't think that was appropriate, but about keeping the board informed about the progress of the investigation and interim findings. So when I found out that this particular person was getting back every paycheck, what he paid into the retirement system, I thought it was important to let them know so that they could stop it immediately. Not to wait 6 weeks until my report was done or the investigation was done. They needed to know then so they could stop it then, because the perpetuation of that kind of thing is even more problematic. And also from a purely dynamic standpoint in dealing with the legislative auditor's office in that particular situation, I wanted to make sure the board was able to say that as we found things, we fixed them. We didn't wait. We did it the next day. So, that's important to show that you're relying upon an honest investigation and taking prompt remedial action to correct issues. It's kind of what we're talking about. There are oftentimes parallel proceedings going on, whether it's a lawsuit, whether it's an audit, whether it's an investigation. We, in the context of what I've been talking about, we didn't deal with the internal auditor's office until after our investigation concluded. Their investigation was still open. Ours had concluded. We got a call that said, "Can you come meet with us and talk to us about your investigation?" I got consent from the school system to do that, and went and shared with them the results. But those parallel things happen quite frequently in these kind of situations. Another challenge is resource constraints. So there is no statute that says the local governing body, like in the financial situation, if you're taking over, that they got to pay for everything. And sometimes it's a stretch of some smaller governmental bodies resources, to hire people to help them in this context. And so, what we try to do to the extent that we can in those situations is leverage technology. So, if you do interviews, I'm in Baton Rouge, you're in Homer, you got Zoom, I can interview you by Zoom. I don't need to drive to Homer to sit down face-to-face and talk to someone. So we try to do that in order to save costs and focus more on things that we consider to be material. So here's some best practices. Standards, protocols, confidentiality rules, interview guidelines, and reporting formats. If you're going to do an investigation internally, you can't just say, hey, will you do the investigation? Well, how am I supposed to do that? I mean, people who are going to do investigations need to be trained. I've been trained, and they can only happen in the context that we're talking about with someone who has an adequate amount of training. Not this 1 hour, by the way. That's not adequate by any stretch of the imagination. But there are people like myself who will come in to organizations, and maybe they have a group of 5 people that, this is going to be our investigative team. If we need them, we'll go in and do a 20-hour or 25-hour training and go through all these different things in much more detail. Building capacity, this is kind of what we're talking about. But still, that group still needs to have oversight. They need to report to someone who's able to ensure that they're conducting any investigation independently and aren't being harassed or harangued by leadership. And again, in the case of elected officials or senior leadership, I would certainly recommend to you that someone independent be hired. This is the big problem too in smaller local governments. They have the stack, right? It's on their desk with all their other stuff. It goes missing. But what happened to it? No one knows. And so, it's a best practice to scan those documents, put them back where you found them, and make sure that they're maintained for posterity. Also, we want to be transparent about the outcome of an investigation. I don't know about the governing authorities that you guys work for, but I'm sure some of them have meetings that nobody attends. But in my experience, generally, at school board meetings, there's always a few people who are education advocates who are there every meeting. They want to speak on every item, and they're going to call you to task if you're not transparent about the outcome of whatever you do. So concluding, these kind of investigations are a essential part of what should be going on. They can prevent a lot of financial, legal, and reputational harm to your local governmental body. And they can also create a culture of openness and fairness and accountability amongst your employees. If you let someone who you know is harassing someone or haranguing them get away with it, what does that do to other people? Well, Bob got away with it. I'll use this epithet to talk about other employees as well. He didn't get in trouble, so I'm probably not going to get in trouble. You got to nip that in the bud. And that creates a culture to where these statistics aren't what they are. act decisively, trigger, preserve evidence, protect people, and investigate impartially and defensively. So we've talked about that. This is important as well. If you have a problem, let's investigate it and fix it. But then let's come back next year and talk to people and see if it was actually fixed. You have an annual financial audit. This is kind of a HR type audit that we're generally involved in. Let's see whether or not what we did fixed the problems. I'm not going to. So if there are people who are interested, and hopefully some of you are, what I did in preparation for this is I prepared some forms. Those are behind a firewall on our website, so you can access them by going to the website. At the bottom of each page, actually, there's a button that says Helpful Resources. Click on that, enter your email, enter a password. It'll allow you access. It has 12 or 14 forms that you can use as part of an investigation if you decide you want to bite that off, including evidence logs, all of those kind of things. And so those resources are there for you. They were prepared exclusively for you. And so take that opportunity to do that. Anybody have questions, comments? Yes, sir.
Sir, Rob Billings, Louisiana Military Department. My question is, do you have any recommended techniques, practices, procedures to help you avoid confirmation bias? I find myself, maybe due to my experiences, but constantly wanting to see the worst of people or assuming that they're guilty because there's a complaint. So I find myself identifying exactly what I'm expected to find. Is there any way to avoid that?
I'm no psychologist. But, I guess the question is that if somebody makes a complaint, I mean, you're saying that you believe one side of the story and are unable to, after hearing the complaint, believe the other people. And really in the context that we're talking about, my experience after doing this for as long as I have is generally the story is somewhere in between, right? Generally, if you got somebody saying A and somebody saying Z, the actual story falls around M. And the only thing that I could tell you is that the best thing that you can do is try to keep an open mind. Say, look, I empathize with you. We're going to look into it. But try not to make a conclusion based upon hearing one side of the story. That would be equivalent to when I tell people this story all the time, and for you guys who are a little bit older, you'll appreciate this. In the past, when I was a kid in elementary school or whatever, if a teacher called one of my parents, you were in trouble. It didn't matter what they called about. If they called, you were in trouble. And if the teacher said you did X, it didn't matter what you said. You could have been in Tokyo on that day. You did it. And so that's kind of what you're talking about. We don't care what the kid says, the adult controls. But I also tell people I got in trouble a lot of times for that, but I probably didn't get in trouble a lot of times for things that I actually did. But it's best to keep an open mind, and that's part of the reason why, when a complaint's received and we're engaged to do something, we generally start with the other side first. Because I'm trying to avoid feeling the sympathy, feeling the empathy for someone who's been in a bad situation. I want to hear the best other side before I talk to them, and give the other side an opportunity. And also, hey, you can talk to Bob and Joe and Sam as well, and they'll support my side of the story. And not to say that numbers, just like lawsuits, doesn't matter how many witnesses you have. It's the strength and credibility of the ones that are there. But as part of that, you have to kind of assess their credibility as well. I don't believe this person because it doesn't make sense, whatever the reason is. And so, I think it's best kind of have those reports one place, do the background you need to do, and then go back and actually have a conversation with the complainant about it. Yes, ma'am.
I have a couple online questions for you. The first one is there a particular software program that you use or recommend to track investigations and create reports?
So there are so many software options available out there. I wouldn't want to recommend any. Most of what we do, because I don't want to spend $1,200 or $1,300 a month for a subscription to a program, is that, for example, there is no report there is no software that allows you to dump all your data in it and it beautifully writes a report for you. That doesn't exist. This is not financial accounting where 1 + 1 always equals 2. This is more nuanced. And so for example, in securing and tracking documents, we use things like Excel. And in Excel, we can actually create, a cell where if we click on that cell, it'll open the document. All those tools are generally available to most of the people in this room, as well as online, and they're free. And so, we try to leverage those kind of things because that allows us to do this kind of work more cost efficiently, I guess.
And then one more online question was, do you administer an oath when you question people?
No. I'm not a judge. I'm not a court. I'm just a guy who someone hired to do an investigation. So no, I don't get someone to swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help them God. Because, even if they lied, I can't enforce it. And I don't have FBI powers, for example, or if you lie to me, that you're going to jail. So the answer to that question is no. Yes, ma'am. Yes.
I just, real quick, going back to the gentleman that talked about confirmation bias, I appreciate the honesty and being vulnerable because I think most of us in this room have confirmation bias. You may disagree with me, but subconsciously we do that. There is a lot of confirmation bias training to pull it out and so that you see it. If you don't want to do that, I recommend the book by Malcolm Gladwell, Blink. It's very eye-opening how we all assume things based on stereotypes and things. So I just wanted to throw that out there that it is a real thing.
Yeah, look, we would all be lying to ourselves if we said that we weren't biased. That's probably the biggest truth that I can say this morning, because we all have biases. And whether they deal with race or sex or age or anything else, we all do. On the other hand, we don't all have empathy, right? And the levels of our empathy are varied as well. And so, as a woman, you may be more empathetic to the position of a woman, where some women are probably the exact opposite, right? I mean, so it's all individualized, but you got to, in your head, understand your limitations and be able to try to control whatever limitations you have on those types of biases that you know exist within you, right? Thank y'all. I appreciate it.